Hey, it's DeagleBeagle. So I'm making a video today about Flutter because it was probably the number one most used Pokemon in the preseason Series 1. Pikalytics doesn't even have stats on it anymore. I don't know why they wiped it all, but at least we have our memories. So these are just 5 ways on how to use it. There's, of course, more ways, but I just figured I'd show you some ways on how to use these high tier Pokemon or the Quark Drive and Photosynthesis Mons in more detail. So Flutter has choice specs in this case, and the Terra type, you could make it a defensive Terra type, but if I'm using specs personally, I would probably want an offensive Terra type because you can outspeed and hopefully one shot whatever's trying to kill you, but not necessarily, especially if they have priority. That's why normally people, or not normally, but it's common that I've seen Sarnia or Zarnia, whatever, and or Indeedee with Flutter because otherwise Scissor can just bullet punch this thing, and if it doesn't have a defensive Terra, then it dies. So I would expect that to be very common, and I would not expect Scissor to be like an easy solution to countering Flutter Now, with that said, let's look at its moves really quick. I meant to include an Icy Wind set in here. In fact, if you have a defensive Terra, you could even have Icy Wind in it. I'll get to that later. So, choice specs though, I would probably use both Moonblast and Dazzling Gleam because you have a high amount of damage output. And I meant to say, by the way, I don't know why my name is banned on Showdown. I never found out why it was banned a couple years ago, and I didn't really fight it or anything. I go by a different username now, for the most part, and no one even knows what it is except myself and like one friend, as far as I know. And this is not my regular use. I just made up something because I need to record a video. But anyways, I'm gonna see if I can try to get my name unbanned because I don't really need the fame or popularity or whatever. But I would just like people to connect me with me more, instead of me just like talking from an alias and stuff, and people think it's just some random alias that someone's talking from. So anyways, Dazzling Gleam is good for the spread damage. It might have more net damage than Moonblast, and you can pressure them in situations where they have low HP on one Pokemon, but you want to also get damage on the other. So let's say they have 1 HP left. Moonblast would probably be less ideal than Dazzling Gleam unless they have Wide Guard. So you might want a Dazzling Gleam there. Unless you are afraid of getting locked into a certain move with choice specs. So you gotta pick carefully, and this does have pretty good coverage. Now, I don't have Terra Blast on any of these sets, but I suppose you could. But normally though, I don't think you would want to run Terra Blast with Flutter because not only do you have to run a Terra for it to be useful, it's like probably the main good Terras with Flutter are the 2 stab ones. Also, where you have a move that's unstab, like Mystical Fire, it can give you a good defensive Terra as well as offensive. And that's mostly it because besides Icy Wind, it doesn't have a lot of other good moves. Energy Ball is okay, but I don't think it's quite worth a slot. Thunderbolt might be alright. Maybe Thunder on a rain team, but overall doesn't have a lot of good offensive moves, just a few. So I suppose you could use Terra Dark with it and use Dark Pulse, but since that has similar offensive coverage to Shadow Ball, probably not. And I meant to say you could use a Calm Mindset too, possibly with it, but With it having such low defense, I probably won it. Because you'll just be hit by a physical attack instead, probably. But I suppose it is viable. But for this one, no matter what they have, like let's say they do have scissor. Well, if you have some way to stop bullet punch or to survive it, and well, in this case, it wouldn't survive it because it's Terra Fairy. But let's say you had Zarnia with it, then you can Mystical Fire the scissor or other steel Pokemon for the coverage. Shadow Ball doesn't normally one-shot other Flutter Mains, but if you're Specs, it could. And I would use Timid with almost all the Flutter Mains because Ghost super affects Ghost, so you probably want to outspeed the mirror. It's kind of similar to the Gengar mirror. But in that case, I prefer a modest Gengar because if the mirror isn't super common, then you might want to focus on everything else. But since the mirror is going to be extremely common with Flutter Mane, I would probably make almost all of them timid. Now, the other set you could use is Imprison Trick Room. And since you have Sash, I would use an offensive Terra. So probably either Terra Fairy or Terra Ghost. You might even want Terra Ghost because you can wall their Flutter Mane and then Terra Ghost Shadow Ball and one shot it. But anyways, I don't invest any in bulk in this one either because it has Sash. And you're just trying to get in a prison Trick Room versus a Trick Room team or set up Trick Room if they have Tailwind. So this, I really like this one too because if you happen to outspeed their Flutter Mane and you imprison, they can't Shadow Ball, Dazzling Gleam, use Imprison or Trick Room. So all they really can do is like Moonblast or Mystical Fire if they have that even. So uh, it hopefully you would outspeed though. And then I forgot to put a nature on this one. Okay, so you could use booster energy. By the way, you could alternatively use Torkoal to activate photosynthesis. Torkoal will be very common again, even though it is countered by a lot of things and very slow. And it's hard for you to counter rain with it, but rain counters you a lot easier because even if you switch in Torkoal when they have a rain team, it's like it's still weak to water and has low special defense, and you get your eruption weakened, and it's like slower than everything. So it's like Torkoal is good, but it might be overrated. Even with all these photosynthesis Pokemon, you might instead want to use like Manual Sunny Day with Sableye or Murkrow or something. We'll see how the metagame shifts. Now, for this set, it depends on what you want to do. You might actually want a defensive one because you risk them outspeeding, Terra Ghosting, and killing you. You might want Terra Dark or something. But well, if you have booster energy, actually, let me do a calculation because I know booster energy boosted by 30% like Life Orb does. Flutter Mane with Timid versus another Flutter Mane that has no bulk. Most of them probably won't run any bulk. So if you use either Life Orb or is it Sun, Photosynthesis or Booster Energy or Life Orb, it would do this much. So yeah, normally it would kill, but if you have no Sun, it almost never will kill. If you have no Sun, no Life Orb, no Specs, no Terra Ghost or whatever, then normally they will barely survive. So this is an option. You can also use Terra Fire, but personally, I mean maybe, but you might want to use Terra Fire, but Terra Dark would wall their Flutter Mane more if you're trying to wall them and other Pokemon in general. But Terra Fire would make it... Where did I have the Terra Fire one? Terra Fire would make it actually resistant to Bullet Punch from Scissor, and you could fire back with a Mystical Fire. So maybe mystical. So maybe Terra Fire is better, but in the Flutter main mirror, it isn't better, most likely. So this is the Life Orb one. Icy Wind is going to be a pretty good move in general, and you could use Protect here instead. And then this one, Sash. Actually, since you have Sash, you might want to use Icy Wind on the Sash one, and then Protect on the one that doesn't have Sash, because you don't have Sash to kind of stop you from dying from one hit. And then probably Terra Ghost, so you can wall their Flutter main and one shot it with Terra Ghost. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.